Welcome to tonight's program. Thanks for joining us here. This is the biggest panel discussion that we've ever had, and it's mainly because we've got such a terrific lineup of speakers. But I also think, to a certain degree, it's the way in which we communicated the topic, because we made the topic into an equation. That's the best way to get through to the MIT community. So, the electric grid is destined for very, very big changes over the next generation. Solar, storage, and control technology is making the traditional one-way grid obsolete. We can generate, we can store electricity all over the grid, and there's a lot of software and control systems that are coming out that allow us to optimize where those electrons are going between the sources of generation and the people who are using it. It's technology that's driving these changes. And interestingly enough, the leading companies are based here in California, and I'm very happy to say that we've got them here on the panel. And customers are adopting this technology all over the country and eventually all over the world. And I'm really, really looking forward to the discussions that we're going to have today. Now, just in terms of a little bit of background, I've been in the solar industry for a long time, and when we measure the cost of solar panels, we're measuring them in dollars per watt of DC output. And batteries, when you're measuring the cost of batteries, typically we're measuring the output, the cost of the batteries in terms of dollars per kilowatt hour. Now, what's interesting is that the installed costs of a complete solar system have declined from about $10 a watt in 2000 down to about $3.50 a watt now. So if you're looking for solar for your house, $3.50 a watt, $4 a watt, maybe a little bit more. Obviously, commercial and utility scale is a lot less. If you're looking for solar, if you're looking for a battery storage system, that's still expensive. You know, we're looking at costs that are more like solar in 2000. It's about $1,000 a kilowatt hour. So a 10 kilowatt hour battery storage system will cost about $10,000. That's the all-in cost. We're talking about a complete system. The battery subsystem, so Tesla's selling them, Enphase is selling them in Australia. The batteries themselves cost a lot less. But these systems include an inverter, controls, there's engineering and design work, and obviously there's installation. That adds a lot to the cost. You need a lot of power to run a house. A 200 amp service in a normal home at 240 volts AC is 48,000 watts. I kind of like to look at the tachometer in my car, which is no longer a tachometer, it's a power meter, and I can see that, you know, when I'm going 40 miles an hour, I'm using 50 kilowatts of power. That's about the amount of total power that a house would use at peak. Just to put that in perspective, that 48,000 watts, the average PV inverter is about 6,000 watts. And that would be the same as about 24 Enphase microinverters. So if you can imagine, to run everything in your house at once, looking at this diagram of a battery storage system, you'd need a really big inverter. And what's more, to run everything in your house for a few days, you're going to need a lot of batteries. And since people generally aren't going to be putting in an enormous 50 kilowatt inverter or 100 kilowatt hours of batteries, what they normally do, and you can see this down here in the bottom right, they put in what's called a backup sub-panel. That's the lights, the fridge, the heating, other necessities of life like a TV and a phone charger. This is called a critical load sub-panel. And only this sub-panel gets battery power in a blackout. The rest of the circuits have no power.
Enough of the geeky single-line drawings. You were supposed to learn that in 6071.
God, is that you?
Yes? You were expecting a lower voice? First there was the grid.
And a good grid, it has been. Speaking of the grid, we have Chris Johns here from PG&E. Chris is the vice chairman and former president of PG&E. And I have to hand it to PG&E. In my experience, after dealing with utilities all over the country, PG&E is the most solar-friendly utility in the country. If anybody here is thinking about putting solar on their roof, we're down to interconnections in only a few days. So what used to take 3 to 6 months, we're now getting done in 30 days from the beginning to the end. And that's an amazing achievement, and I hope it is something that the rest of the utilities around the country can begin to adopt.
And then there was light.
Ah, solar panels. Yes. You mean those things that turn photons into electrons? Well, also on the panel here we have SunPower. They're based right here in Silicon Valley. And SunPower is well known for making the most efficient solar panels on the planet that are used for grid applications. Jack Pirok, their EVP of products, is joining us here tonight.
Your grid is based on AC power, but solar panels produce DC power.
Ah, not to worry. We have inverters to change the direct current into alternating current. These inverters can also provide grid communication services and management services, and that's going to become very, very important in Grid 2.0. Enphase is the market leader with microinverters, and we're happy to say that Raghu Belor, their VP of Products and Strategies and founder of Enphase, is here tonight.
Okay, wise guy, what are you going to do at night?
One word: batteries. Obviously, we can store the solar energy that's generated during the day and use it at peak times at night. Tesla is now making residential and commercial battery storage systems. I kind of liken it to a Model S without wheels, but much, much cheaper. Matteo Jaramillo, Tesla's Director of Stationary Storage, is also here tonight.
Barry, do you know what all this means?
Not really. I'm just a local solar installer. I have a lot of questions too, like you in the audience. When I need answers, I read Green Tech Media. Eric Wessoff, Green Tech Media's editor-in-chief, is here to moderate our panel discussion.
Oh, a moderator. Is Donald Trump one of the panelists? Good luck.
God is entitled to get all the good lines. But now that we have the grid, solar panels, inverters, and storage, we have all the ingredients we need for Grid 2.0. So our format tonight is we're going to have a brief presentation from each of the panelists, followed by a round-robin discussion that's moderated by Eric Wessoff with Green Tech. Then we'll take questions from the audience that were submitted in advance and also questions that were submitted on cards. We're going to start off this evening with a presentation from Chris Johns with PG&E. Hey, come on up, Chris.
Thank you. Well, thank you, everyone, and thanks for the invitation. I'm not sure I can really follow that act, though. So there's no comedy in my part of the presentation. But, you know, it's really fun to be here and especially talk about this, what's going on with Grid 2.0 or the utility of the future. And it's something that we in the industry have been very engaged in and talking quite a bit about. And for me, this is one of the most dynamic times, at least in my career working in and around the utility industry, that I've ever seen. And that's because there's so much new technology coming into our space. It used to be, honestly, that the utilities did most of the technological advances themselves, or that they were working with somebody, and yes, you know, the generators have gone up in scale and much better over the years, but it was in you know, very limited amounts and in very slow kind of an environment. But today's world, we have so much new technology, whether it's technology that's coming in terms of how generation is done, or whether it's technology that we're using on the lines and just how you keep the lights on and in a more reliable way. And so with that means that the pace of change is going to continue to grow at a much faster pace. And that's something that we in the industry have to learn to adapt to and embrace and move forward on. So it's really exciting to be here. And then when you look at what's happening in the industry around cleaner energy, that change is also occurring very, very quickly. If you look at all the different states are continuing to raise the bar in terms of how much they want to encourage their utilities to increase the amount of renewables with targets or reduce greenhouse gases. You look in the state of California, we just have Senate Bill 350 that just passed, which will now have a target of having 50% renewables by 2030. Something that we supported and that we think is doable. But you know, think about just how long ago it was there wasn't any targets and how fast that's moving. You look at what's happening in the various commissions across the country. New York is very much looking at the REV process in terms of now what does the utility of the future look like and what is their role in terms of now all this new technology coming on. And in California, we're looking at a lot of different things, whether it's about renewables, distributed resources, electric vehicles, net energy metering. All of those things are in process of being looked at and changed. Nationally, we just have Obama's administration with his landmark Clean Power Plan. And look what happened just last week with the Pope in the United States talking to Congress and talking to the UN about the need to look at climate change and take that seriously. And on top of that, all the world leaders are going to be getting together in Paris soon to focus on that. So virtually at every level, there is a focus on what are we doing to make sure that we're cleaning up our energy resources. And at the same time, our customers are thinking about it. You know, for the longest time, we used to always think and focus on our customers wanting safe, reliable, and affordable energy. And that's still true. That's not going to change. I'm pretty sure if I went and asked any of you, you want to make sure the lights stay on all the time, that the fuels are delivered safely, and that it's more affordable. But at the same time, our customers are focused a lot more on the cleanliness of the energy resources that they have. And they are because they have much more choices now than they've ever had before, whether it's putting solar panels or on their roofs or whether it is having the opportunity to have battery storage. People are loving the fact that they have a lot more choices than what they've ever had. And at PG&E, we've really embraced that. We have probably one of the cleanest footprints in the entire United States. We're up over 25% renewables right now. And by the way, the definition in California of renewables does not include all of our hydroelectric system, which is clean. And it doesn't include our nuclear, which you would not expect it to, but that's also clean. And so right now, we're well over 50% greenhouse gas free. And by the time we hit the target in 2020 on just 30%, we'll be up close to 70% greenhouse gas free, which we take very seriously and we're very proud of. In addition to that, thank you. In addition to that, you know, when you look in California and even in our own service territory, we're embracing the different technologies that are coming on. You know, Barry talked a little bit about our rooftop solar. We have in PG&E service territory alone over 175,000 rooftop solar customers. That's 1/4 of all rooftop solar in the entire United States is in Northern and Central California. We're hooking up a new person one every 11 minutes. That's how fast we're hooking up new solar, how many new solar customers that we're having in our service territory. If you look in California as a whole, we've got the most electric vehicles in the country in the state of California. And we've got a goal from the state to have 1.5 billion zero-emission vehicles on the road in the next 10 years, something that we're well on the way to achieving. We also have, I'm sorry? What did I say, billion? That would be a lot, wouldn't it, a billion? Maybe I do have a little comedy in it. 1.5 million, thank you. And then we've been doing energy efficiency out here in California for the last 30 years, and we've had great results. There's still a lot of opportunities there, but you know, we love to quote the fact that over the last 30 years in California, the average electricity use per capita has stayed relatively flat, and that's through all the advances in technology and all the new plugins that you have in your homes, while the rest of the United States has grown about 50%. And that's the value of having that. So we obviously have a lot that we're embracing and that we're doing, and I think it is that opportunity for us as an industry. We have to embrace that because that's what our customers want. They want more choice, they want more control because they have a much greater understanding of their energy usage. And the grid plays an essential role in that. And that's really what we're focused on as a company, is how do we make sure that the grid is flexible and viable for all these new technologies. And in fact, I liken it a lot to a computer and the internet. You know, these computers that we have now that are in our pockets, these smart tablets that we use, and the computers we have, very strong, great things. But how much more valuable are they because they're hooked up to the internet and they're interconnected? I mean, they'd be great standalone, but the real value is because of all the connection that they have with all the other devices. They call it, what, the Internet of Things, right? Well, at PG&E, we look at the grid of the future, and we actually are building what we call the grid of things. Because when we look forward, we know that we're going to have all these renewables coming on, so that our grid has to be able to ramp up and ramp down the power supply, that as the sun goes up or the wind starts to blow, that it can take those renewable resources and integrate them efficiently in the grid, because people don't want to see any kind of voltage fluctuations or the lights go out just because the sun goes behind a cloud or something. So we've got to make sure that's true. At the same time, we have customers that want to have the solar panels on their rooftops and they want to have the batteries in their garage. And you know what? They either want to have the access to PG&E once in a while if those aren't working, or most likely what they want to be able to do is take some of that and potentially sell it back on. So our grid has to make sure that it can go both ways and be able to facilitate that kind of transaction. And potentially they may not want to sell it to PG&E, they may want to sell it to their neighbor. And so we've got to make sure that the grid and the connections there are capable to be able to handle that kind of a transaction. Electric vehicles that we talked about, our customers expect to be able to plug in anywhere, anytime, and charge up their cars. And in the future, they may even want to be able to have that available and get incentives from us to have access to pull the storage back out. In fact, we're right now doing a pilot with BMW, where they're promising a certain number of their electric vehicles to be on the grid at a certain period of time to give us access to use them as a demand-side management tool. And so we're trying to see what that will look like. But that's what our customers expect. Our customers are buying all these smart devices now that they're putting in their homes, that they want to have interact with the electricity grid and be run at the right time and in the cheapest way. And so we've got to make sure that we facilitate that. And at the same time, everybody still wants the lights to stay on because they want to be able to charge everything when they need to. And so we've got to have reliability, and we've got to build a grid that we call self-healing with the technologies that you don't see, that we're actually putting on the lines now that can detect potential faults, can detect when there's weaknesses in the line, and then route around it so that they actually can prevent an outage. All of those kind of things have to be done as we look at the grid of the future, or our grid of things. Now, I do think that there's a couple key things that we have to do to make sure that this comes around. And one of them is making sure that we have the capability to invest and modernize this. If you think about it, most of the grids, even across the United States, are getting to be about 60 years old because a lot of it was done post-World War II. And so it's got to be replaced. But it can't be replaced just as it is. It has to be modernized. We have to build in all these technologies into that grid so that it can handle all the new things that are coming along. And we have to make sure that we have the funds available to do that and make sure that we're making those smart investments. And one of the things that we have to do along those lines, and this probably will come up tonight, is make sure that the pricing is right on how that is done. Because we're a company that has traditionally billed all of our customers on a per kilowatt hour basis. Well, you know what? The kilowatt hours are decreasing, whether it's because there's solar panels on the roofs, or there's direct access or community choice aggregation like we have here, or because there's a lot more energy efficiency programs in place. The traditional method of billing on a per kilowatt hour basis has got to change, because we're focused now mostly on making sure that the wire and the infrastructure there is connected and capable of handling all these new technologies, but that's not producing a per kilowatt hour. So we've got to look at what are the different types of arrangements we can make, similar to what they went through in telecom, similar to what they went through in cable, where you just can't do that anymore. So that's something we're going to have to team up with our customers and with our regulators to figure out what is the appropriate solution for that. Because after all, what customers may be looking at is what we're supplying is voltage and frequency control, or we're providing backup power supply, or we're providing peak demand type services, or access to customers' markets for those that want to sell. So that's one of the things that we have to also focus on. The second one is we have to focus more on partnerships. We need to partner with these guys here who are bringing different technologies to bear to our industry, non-traditional utility players who are going to now have interactions with our customers. We've got to be partners with them so that we understand what their needs are, what the grid's going to have to be able to do to make sure all these technologies can work for our customers. And then finally, what we need to be able to do is make sure that the policies, legislatively and regulatory policies, are enabling these kind of things to happen. Let's face it, technology changes very rapidly. Regulation and legislation doesn't. And so we've got to either allow regulation and legislation that permits a lot more flexibility for us and for others in the industry, or they need to get out of the way so that we can progress a little bit faster. So we're excited about the grid of things and about the technologies that are coming on, and I look forward to tonight listening to my fellow panelists and engaging with you about what the future looks like for Grid 2.0, or as we like to call it, the grid of things. So thanks, and I'm excited to be here tonight.
Terrific. That was good, and especially I like your comment about how technology changes so much faster than the policy, and that's something that we're all here changing that technology, but the policy's got to keep up with it. All right, let's get to the next presentation here. Okay, it's my pleasure to introduce Matteo Jaramillo here from Tesla Stationary Products, and he's got some interesting things to share with us about their new storage systems.
Great. Thanks, everybody. It's great to be here and share in this event with the MIT Energy Club. That's how I originally came in contact with most MIT folks. There's a great club back at the campus, if you're not aware, which basically just focuses on energy. They have a great energy conference. So maybe you guys do that. That's a little plug for the MIT Energy Conference there. There's an elephant in the room, and that's how much Tesla's batteries cost. I figured I'd just go ahead and address that right now. Well, I'll address one specific cost, which is a battery, which is a dead battery. How much does a dead battery cost? Anybody know? It's free, no charge. Come on. Come on. If anybody has any of their battery jokes, feel free to tell them throughout the night. Okay, now to the real stuff. That one's also a joke. The preface to why Tesla is working in battery systems which are connected to the grid is very much the same reason why we're working in electric vehicles in the first place, which is the mission of the company, to accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy. And for those of you who saw the presentation that Elon gave on Tuesday night, revealing the Model X, which is the long-awaited car from Tesla, at least it is for many of us at the company, he cited this same reason as why we were launching the Model X as well. And basically, if we succeed on electric vehicles, and that's not just we Tesla, that's we as a society, then we succeed in a very large way. In other words, if you aim in the right way and you hit your target, then you've made a big impact. But if all we do is focus on the electric vehicle side of it, and we ignore the charging side of those electric vehicles, because those cars are inherently connected cars, then we've left half the opportunity, at least, on the table. And so, fulfilling the mission really requires that we're working on both sides of the ledger there, and that we're really doing everything that we can to advocate for, enable, and deploy renewable technologies for generation side of it. So that's where our motivation for working in battery storage comes in, connected to the grid. Given that the company's headquarters are just around the corner here, most of you are probably familiar with some of these major facts here, but only to highlight the fact that the company still is extremely young compared to both industries in which we're operating. Certainly on the automotive side, where most of our competitors, colleagues, have been around for around a century, and then on the electric grid side, where As Chris just mentioned, most of the grid is quite old, about 60 years old, or in other words, about 5 times as old as Tesla is. And we always, of course, keep that in mind when we're working in these industries, which are very mature and which are used to doing things in a certain way. And we hopefully are approaching those industries, yes, with technology that we think is good and that can benefit both of them, but also with a mindset to make sure that they're deployed correctly. Both of these industries for Tesla require these partnerships that Chris was talking about. Especially for an electric vehicle, which at the end of the day comes in and gets plugged in. It's got to plug into something, and you better have a relationship with those electrons on the other end of the charge cord. So, it requires a lot of collaboration across geographies, across regions, across partners. I should have updated it here. The last major event in the company's history is, of course, this launch that we just had for the Model X. But just before that was the unveiling of the Tesla Energy initiative, which we actually began at the company more than 5 years ago. So we've been thinking about battery systems and how they're connected to the grid for some time within the company. We didn't just sort of think of it overnight and then take the wraps off it. And the reason that we have been thinking about grid-connected battery systems is because really Tesla is a battery company, if you sort of want to distill it down to that. Really the powertrain engineering was the engineering competency of the company, which sort of set off the path for the rest of the products that we have. And it was really that powertrain technology that was commercialized in many ways first. The Roadster, of course, we made the powertrain. We didn't make the car, we made the powertrain. Somebody else made the car. In this case, it was Lotus. And we started making batteries for other car companies before we made our second battery for our own car. In fact, before we made our own car, we had already built batteries for 3 separate companies. 3 separate projects. You see the smart car there in the bottom. This is more or less chronologically. The smart car there, we also had a small A-class program with Daimler. In the meantime, we also had an agreement with Toyota where we made the entire powertrain, not just the battery. And then we subsequently followed up the earlier Daimler deals with the Mercedes B-Class, which is now available in California as well, all electric. And one of the major learnings that we had in doing those developments was that it was absolutely a requirement to develop complete systems. So when we first developed the smart battery, we provided the battery, somebody else provided the drive inverter, somebody else provided the charger, somebody else provided the controls over the entire thing. And it was not an easy integration. It was fiendishly difficult to coordinate 5 different counterparties, including Daimler. We realized that in order to really hit the performance targets, to hit the efficiency targets, to hit the cost targets, you really have to deliver completely integrated battery systems. Indeed, after our experience with Smart, we only did complete battery systems for both Daimler and for Toyota. All of those systems which I described, Tesla designed, developed, and produced, and then subsequently sold. We are today producing all of those systems in Fremont, California. Battery, drive inverter, motor, gearbox, charging systems, thermal systems in Northern California, exporting them to Germany where they're produced into electric vehicles. And that's something about which we're quite proud. But that learning was very deeply embedded in how we approached battery development overall, that you must deliver complete battery systems. If you give somebody just a cell of a battery, they really don't know what to do with it. There are no applications for just batteries all by themselves. Complete batteries, in other words, the delivered energy at the correct AC voltage is really what you want. That's how you sort of simplify the transaction. That's how you ensure that current industries can take batteries, although they may be relatively new technologies to the grid, that AC interface is certainly not. And if you can sort of distill it down to that interface, then you have a chance of seeing the adoption rates that certainly we're shooting for. Another major way in which Tesla's engaged with the grid, whether it's 1.0 or whatever dot it may be, is on the charging side, as I mentioned. And the first major effort that we had to really engage was on the supercharger side of things. This is our so-called supercharger high-powered DC charging stations, which are conveniently located just off highways near you, and enable long-distance driving. We started this effort in the fall of 2012, and in the intervening time have deployed more than 500 stations around the world, with more than 3,000 stalls. Basically, this map is very similar to what's there in Europe, and a very quickly growing map in Asia as well. And the basic idea is that, of course, anytime you tell somebody there's a limitation on a product, i.e. a range on a car, they immediately tell you all the reasons why they need to exceed that range tomorrow and get a load of tomatoes to New Jersey overnight. So that's why we developed the supercharger network. In the course of deploying this network, we have engaged with literally hundreds of different utilities, grid operators, distribution operators, and retailers as well. Many folks here probably know this. There's more than 3,500 utilities in the United States alone. Of course, many of those are small. You'll see if you sort of look around the expanse of the country, we are in a lot of small jurisdictions. We're in rural co-op territory, essentially. And so we've worked with a lot of these folks to bring power in, to assuage their fears around how the load is going to impact their management of their grid. And we started many of the initial conversations around grid-connected battery storage in the context of superchargers, which we were bringing in. So we've really started to engage deeply with the utility industry for some time now. And we really see it as a core feature of what we're going to be doing going forward. And that very much is part of how we think about the distributed connected vehicle fleet as well. These numbers are a little bit out of date, but it gives you a general sense. More than 70,000 cars out there in the world, which collectively represent, on a nameplate rated basis, more than 5 gigawatt hours of energy storage, which makes Tesla the largest battery manufacturer in the world by far. And interestingly enough, more than 20 or so, 21 gigawatts of bidirectional three-phase AC inverters, which would make Tesla one of the largest inverter manufacturers in the world. And so just from that standpoint, the way that we think about energy storage, of course, is at large volumes, but they're also at integrated systems. And it's, in that context, that it's not such a huge leap to start talking about connected stationary battery systems. Collectively, those cars have driven more than 1 billion miles. Yes, billion this time. And all of that data has come back to us. We see how the cars are performing. We see how the batteries are performing. We see the voltages at which people are charging in the world. We see the way that they are connecting and disconnecting from the grid. Of course, none of it's personal information. It's all sort of in the aggregate. But it gives us a very high fidelity view into how cars are interacting with the grid. And when we start to think about how cars really do interact with the grid, this is just a bit of a thought experiment. There's about 20 million registered vehicles in the state of California alone, since we're in California. And if we said that 1 million of those, so about 5% of all those vehicles, were to be electric, and they had 10 kilowatt chargers, which the Tesla cars do, but this could come from any manufacturer, that would represent about a 10 gigawatt load. Just for context, the system-wide peak for the California ISO is around 60 gigawatts. Do I have that number right, Chris? 60, 65, somewhere. Peak, right? So we're talking about somewhere around 15, 17%, something like that, of the total load of the system of California, which could come from 5% of all the vehicles which are registered in the state. So you see how there's sort of a very large levering effect that can happen once we start to switch over to electromobility. And so when you see that that's sort of the path that perhaps we're on, well, the implications are that we better have a great way for integrating those resources, for tapping into that battery energy which is available to the car, or not just to the car, but to the grid, and making a really integrated system. So when we do talk about, is solar plus storage some form of the new grid, I think that storage will come from a lot of different places. It won't just come from batteries which are hung on a wall or at a substation. It'll come from cars. It'll come from connected cars. It'll come from corporate fleets. It'll come from all sorts of places where cars are charged and plugged in. And we need to make sure that that's harmonized with rate tariff structures, with wholesale markets, and of course with control schemes as well. So, and that's very much how we think about it. We're very eager to see all the different pilots which are just sort of getting underway in all the different jurisdictions, in not just the United States but Europe as well, for how connected cars are going to be participants in this new world. Tesla, of course, has a lot of confidence that we're going to be able to bring our products to bear in this market because we've designed them to be very much connected, controllable devices. We maintain, as I mentioned, an over-the-air connection to all of our cars. Not only are they sort of sending diagnostic information back, but we're also pushing updates there, improving performance. And just as we do that for the car side, we're also doing that for the grid-connected battery side of it. Additionally, we're also designing the systems sort of with the same mentality, which is a mentality that allows us to be very flexible and scalable. So I know we probably hear those terms too often in the daily vocabulary, but that it really is something that we try and make true for the way that we design our systems and implement our systems. We start from individual cells, what are known as the 18650, 18 millimeters by 65 millimeters cylindrical lithium-ion cells, little cans of energy if you prefer. And those are turned into modules, some grouping of hundreds of cells, and from modules, those go into battery packs. Just for comparison, in the Model S battery pack, which is the gray unit in the middle of the top, has 16 modules, and the Powerwall, the home battery, has 2 modules in it. So just to give you a general sense of sort of number of cells that are in there. And these are complete battery systems. They have their own thermal management systems, of course, their own battery management systems, and they're designed to be integrated into the complete AC delivered battery system as well. And when we think about all those applications, I think the lines in many ways too for how we sort of conceive of the divisions on the grid today. So for example, the meter line is sort of a line that a lot of people have talked about over many years, and behind the meter, front of the meter. I think that line is in some ways going away as well, that resources which today are classified as behind the meter are providing front of the meter resources. And so the ability to control and the ability to ensure that they are performing in a way which is beneficial as opposed to detrimental, which is absolutely possible to do today, remove some of the constraints for the way that we think about how systems should be operating on the grid. And so I put both the Powerwall and the Power Pack on the same slide because either Powerwalls, the home batteries in aggregate, or individuals participating in aggregate as a fleet, or Power Packs, let's say at a commercial industrial facility or directly with the utility, either one of those can participate in all the markets into which battery storage can provide value. And these are some of the main applications that we have here. So everything from peak shifting, either behind the meter due to some tariff reason or for some network operational reason, to load shifting, to basically moving demand around, if you will, to demand response, sort of same thing, but on a different premise, directly with the ISO or with the utility. Grid services, so this could be providing frequency regulation, voltage support, any of the other services which are procured to match supply demand or for resiliency, and then capacity firming, where we're using an intermittent resource and then using the storage to firm that up.
You're 15 minutes into your 5 minutes.
Sorry about that. Questions? We'll go. I'll take questions later. Thanks very much.
I didn't realize the hook reached all the way over from there, but. Okay, next we've got Jack Pirak with SunPower. One of Jack. Watch out for that guy over there.
Yeah, I'm going to adhere to the, I was trying to figure out how I could stretch my presentation out to 20 minutes or so to keep up with you guys. Okay, my name is Jack Pirak. I'm the responsible for products at SunPower. It's really great to be here. It's an honor to be with these guys. I really respect them all. Thanks a lot for including SunPower and me. Got it. Okay. SunPower, in fact, Tesla's mission, our mission is to change the way our world is powered. And it's something that's really core to all the people that work at SunPower and probably a lot of the people in the energy industry. But a little bit about our company. Our company was founded right here in Palo Alto by Dick Swanson about 30 years ago out of Stanford. It's grown. It's now a global company, roughly $2.5 billion in revenue. We employ about 7,000 people globally. We are vertically integrated. So vertically integrated for us means from the PV cell all the way to the end customer. And that's by design. We felt just like Matteo talked about the need to have an integrated solution, we deliver complete solutions and we engineer the entire solution because that's the best way to deliver the best value to our customers. On the cell side, our legacy is in high efficiency PV cells and modules. And we today are producing over 1.6 gigawatts of the world's most efficient cells and modules and shipping currently 21% efficient modules out of those factories. We are two-thirds owned by a company named Total, called Total. Total is a French energy company, very large energy company. We serve really three markets, and I'm just going to not go through the whole deal, but hit a few highlights. On the residential side, where our product is great, high efficiency, high energy density, looks fantastic on a roof, which is important for many people. We serve that market through an independent dealer channel. We have over 1,500 independent dealers worldwide, and that's our primary path to market in all of our chosen markets, with the exception of Japan, where we actually work through partners, including Toshiba in Japan. See, another kind of interesting area that we do a lot of work in is in large-scale utility power plants. We, over the last 10 years, have probably been part of some of the largest power plants built, some of them in PG&E territory. And notably, two notable projects I'll talk about. One was the first merchant power plant that we built in Chile. That came online last year, and that power plant was actually built by investors who built the project, invested in the project, and are selling energy in the spot market in Chile. So they feel very confident over a long period of time that that plant will produce energy and be able to deliver it below the market rate or at a wholesale spot market rate and make money off of that. So really, really important milestone there. And we also finished what at the time was the world's largest PV power plant here in California, 750 megawatt plant, and commissioned that this year, and that's operating currently now. So a huge amount of progress. If I go back to 2005, we built the largest power plant in the world then. It was 10 megawatts. 10 years later, 750 megawatts. Just an incredible, incredible ramp. Okay, I mentioned that we're a global company. I think most companies now need to be global to grow, but I think one thing that's important about this is that it's given us exposure to a variety of market conditions, and that's really, really important. I'll just highlight, this may be obvious to people, but two market conditions in North America. In states that allow net metering, you generate electricity gets exported onto the grid absorbs that energy. In Europe, they have quite a different mechanism. It started out with a feed-in tariff mechanism. It's now gone to a self-consumption mechanism. And those markets are actually significantly driving the way people develop, design, and sell PV systems. It's a very, very important aspect of our industry, is this policy and regulatory part of it. So let me take a look. This Barry showed a slide of cost per watt. This is actually levelized cost of electricity, the graph on the left. And this is, since 2009, the drop in the average cost of electricity produced by solar systems. So hopefully you can notice a trend there. Pretty radical reduction in levelized cost of energy. And that did a lot. The graph on the right is the shipped megawatts of PV systems through 2014 and then forecasted into the future. And you probably see a trend there. So very, very rapid growth in the PV industry, faster than I think most people in the industry believed. Very few, every time the predictions came out, a couple of people would be high, but 80% of the predictions would be low. And a lot of people will look at this and say, the reason what drove this was the cost. And what I'd say is that the cost is absolutely a necessary ingredient to drive this, But what was also necessary, and I think maybe underappreciated by a lot of people at the time, was that the policy is really important. The market conditions have to be right. You need to be able to sell electricity to some entity, whether it be a utility power plant or a residential system, and you need to have those policy and market conditions to make this happen. And I think the solar plus storage is going to be facing the same thing, kind of much earlier in this curve. There's a lot to work out. Costs are important, but also all these other market conditions are necessary to be there. We also need to have financing, which means we need to have investor confidence in the technology. It wasn't always so that people could just count on their PV system to deliver energy. There were a lot of people in the early days who didn't think it was going to work. It wouldn't be bankable. We couldn't get a loan to support that. So those things are all things that need to be established around storage as well. Okay, a little bit about SunPower and our products. I'm just going to talk a little bit about residential and keep this brief. So on the residential side, we deliver complete solutions to our customers in all of our segments. On the residential side, our complete solution starts with a PV system. Great aesthetics, high energy density, fantastic reliability, 25-year energy guarantee, financing, O&M services, so complete PV system. Our customers, however, started to become more and more interested. Sure, they definitely want to deliver renewable energy or produce it, but they want to also understand how they use their energy. Where's it going? What can I do about it? So we've started enhancing or expanding our product to include energy information systems, which allow people to understand what's happening with their energy management systems to allow people to do things with their energy in a more automated way, and of course, battery storage. So that becomes now a complete energy system that we're delivering, and it's much more complicated than just generating solar energy. I'm just going to go through a very quick example, and I'm done. This is just a typical low profile for a house. You see two, kind of a high and a low, without solar energy, just to kind of level set the discussion a little bit. So now somebody gets a solar system on their house. There are two lines to look at. The blue section, that's the energy that's generated by the PV system. What that does to the load of the house is you can see the dotted line. During midday, the system is actually, it would be exporting, a little error in the graph, but be exporting back onto the grid. And there are two things. One, there's a steep ramp, which if you ask a grid operator if everybody in their territory did that, that could be a problem. And then you look at the difference between sort of background load and peak, and that's a big difference. So the utility's got to be prepared for that peak load, if everyone's on that same plan. And the promise, the dream here of storage is that you can help solve that problem. You can take some of that energy that you would be exporting, if you can do this economically, and put it back onto the grid at a later time when it has a lot more value. Now, the person who owns this battery has got to be motivated to do that. They need the market to do that. They need long-term policy to make sure that that's going to last for the duration of the system. They need to finance it probably because it's a long-term investment. So there's a lot of stuff that has to happen to make this work, but that's really, in our view, there's a lot of technology work, there's a lot of cost reduction work that needs to be done. There's a lot of work that needs to be done with markets and policy and financeability that is also going to be important to get the penetration of this more dominant. So look forward to the discussion. Thank you very much. Thank you again for including me.
Terrific. Thanks, Jack. Okay, we've got next Raghu Balor with Enphase. Let's go find your slides here.
Good evening, and thank you for this opportunity. It's an honor. I'm pretty sure I have at least one equation. Actually, that's the original equation, but I got one more, and I'll point that out as we get to it. Just a little bit about Enphase. We were two guys and a dog. The dog still comes to the office, doodling on a whiteboard in December of 2005, so we are amongst amongst this panelist, at least we're one of the youngest companies, started shipping product in 2008. We are an energy technology company. We got our start in solar, and now expanding that into load management and storage, of course. So to date, we do a microinverter system. Microinverter is a device that takes the DC output of a single solar panel and converts it into AC. We have shipped well over 9 million microinverters to date, installed in 340,000 systems in more than 80 countries. My favorite being, we have a 1 kilowatt system somebody installed in Saudi Arabia. It's a start. More than a gigawatt of systems that we have serviced. Just to give you a sense of scale, today, as I said, it's a system, which means we manage, there's a big, massive software infrastructure behind it, because all of our systems are calling home every 5 minutes. We are collecting data not just about the PV, but the inverter, as well as data about the grid. We today manage more than 2 terabytes of data per day from all of our systems. Metrics, some of the metrics are, we transact today more than Twitter on a daily basis. A little more than 500 employees in about 11 countries. It's a pretty patent-rich, as you can imagine. There's a lot of areas to tackle. So when we started the company, we had a few what I call guiding principles. The first one was, we really believe that distributed architectures win in the long run. There's a lot of existence proof of that. The corollary to that being more and more intelligence gets pushed deeper and deeper into the network. The second kind of guiding principle that when we started was everything must be a system. So you just don't build a piece of hardware. It's hardware, comms, bidirectionally preferred, and obviously application layer software. And whatever hardware you do design must be software defined, which means it's got a digital, completely built around a digital architecture, and it's fully adaptive. So these things were very important as we started, as penetration levels of PV have continued to increase. Here's a heat map of the 340,000 odd systems that are worldwide. A couple of points to note. How about 100 plus thousand systems in California? These are all Enphase systems. Enphase public systems, you can actually go to our website and look at them. People who have chosen to expose their system, expose or show their system off. And more than 100,000 systems in California alone. It's about, I think on an aggregate basis, close to 400 or 500 megawatts of Enphase systems out there. Another point to note, about 37,000 systems in Hawaii. And Hawaii's got one of the highest penetration levels of solar PV. You can see Europe, you can see Asia Pacific. We have a lot of systems in Sri Lanka. For those people who are from the Indian Peninsula, one of the top cricketers in Sri Lanka just got his solar system last week, which was pretty exciting for me. So he hasn't called me yet, but we're going to have a chat about that. So all this, but you can see that the concentration or penetration levels of PV in different geographies, and as we know, PV by definition is an intermittent resource, and that does pose some challenges to the grid. So I have a video here of one of those regions where there is a high penetration, and as soon as I find my mouse, what you're going to see is this is an area with high penetration of PV, and occasionally you'll see a little red flash, which is indicating an issue on the grid. It could be a voltage out of range, or frequency out of range, or whatever it may be, an error condition. But periodically, what you'll see, notice, is actually, did I lose my mouse? Oh, here it is. Actually, you'll see network-wide phenomenons, right? Just bear with me for a second. You see, that may be an individual system, but boom, you see this massive events that are taking place all across the network. The interesting thing here is that, A, we are detecting those. So not only we are detecting those, and for that matter, we can in fact go ahead and fix those as well. For the first time, there's an incredible amount of intelligence that's deep in the network. And all of that intelligence that's deep in the network is fully networked back to us. So I'll give you a very concrete example of this. and why those early decisions that we made about those 3 guideposts are paying off. About 3 years ago, HECO, which is the utility in Hawaii, came to us and said, hey, look, our penetration levels are increasing. We need you to make some changes to the way your inverters behave. We were able to do that. There were a couple of hundred systems at that time, and that was not a big deal. But a year ago, they came back to us and said, penetration levels have gone up so much. Enphase is about 150 megawatts of PV on a grid that's about 1.2 gigawatts. We're the second largest generator of solar on that network of all generation sources. So they came to us and said, hey, look, you need to yet again make some changes. In this particular case, they wanted voltage and frequency, trip limits extension, some ride-throughs, et cetera. And we said, sure. And with there was a lot of work to be done in terms of privacy and getting opt-ins, et cetera. With the proverbial push of a button, we remotely changed the behavior of more than 25,000 systems on Oahu alone. That was almost 800,000 microinverters that we were remotely from up here in San Francisco, remotely changed their behavior. I expect that to continue. In fact, we're getting ready to do another mass upgrade, but this is going to be part of the course. So if you think about it, you're buying a PV system. A PV system is a 20-year asset that pays annuities over those 20 years. It's suboptimal, unrealistic to expect that the PV system will not have to evolve over time. The grid conditions, load conditions, EV, et cetera, weather conditions, tariffs are all changing. So our hypothesis here is that distributed energy resources, solar being one of them, add storage to it, will have to adapt over time, which means that distributed energy resources can no longer be simply attached to the grid. They have to be integrated into the grid. They have to be fundamentally a part of the grid. So what this means is, as an industry, we think about is we have a choice. We can continue to install non-adaptive, non-interconnected, what I call dumb solar and dumb storage as well, and that will soon turn into a liability. Hawaii was an example of that. There's no business model that exists where you can do 25,000 truck rolls and remotely and upgrade inverters. It's just not going to work. You need a hyper-connected system for that. So as an industry, we have a choice. We can either be a barnacle on the grid and be a royal pain, or we can be the brains of the grid, in fact, provided you have the right kind of solar and storage, which means a system that's fully adaptive, fully controllable, and hyper-connected. So this is my equation, by the way. Imagine a world where more smart energy you put on there, more distributed energy resources you put on there, the grid becomes more reliable and more efficient. I think that can be achieved. The inverter systems that we are deploying out there, in fact, we are adding so much functionality in there that has nothing to do with the system owner. That has nothing to do with power conversion. Power conversion is only one small part of what it does. I'll give you a couple of examples of that. For instance, we can do things like, we can wave shape to the 8th harmonic, which means if we can detect that, hey, there's a power quality problem, and completely reshape the quality of the waveform at that point. Add storage to it, you can do demand, VAR DR, capacity DR, but you need to have a system that's capable of doing it, a system that's completely connected with a software infrastructure to support all that. So if I may, I'm going to give a little bit of spiel about Enphase. So this is as an example, the smart home energy solution, right? You got control, where we are completely connected to serve the needs of the utility, storage, and we have a very unique storage solution out there, control, and of course, microinverters and stuff on the roof, all managed through a cloud-based software. So the individual elements of those are the microinverter, the control, and that's our storage. We call it, it's a storage solution. We call it an AC battery, the Enphase AC battery, all managed by an energy management, all managed by that energy management system. So for those people who like line diagrams, that's a PV system or an AC module on the roof, which is a module and a microinverter attached to it that puts out your 240 volt split phase at home, goes to a 20 amp breaker. And that's a classic distributed architecture. The entire system is connected in parallel. There's no series connections or panels. We took the exact same approach to storage as well. We said, Rather than having a big bank of batteries, we're going to break everything into small modular chunks of it. And that allows, and embed a bidirectional device, bidirectional converter into it. And that AC battery now puts out 240-volt split phase. The chemistry is somewhat agnostic. You can put any chemistry in there, and two chemistries can live next to each other. It doesn't matter. AC is kind of the USB of power. And all of that is managed by a central device. So with that, that's the same equation, sorry. So is solar plus storage equal to grid 2.0? I would say necessary, but not sufficient. You have to have the right kind of solar plus storage for it to be grid 2.0. And I really believe we can transform what was 20th century's greatest invention into a 21st century invention that is even greater. Thank you.
Terrific. All right. We can turn these slides down. You can turn them from back. All right, Eric?
So there's some kind of weird Einsteinian time dilation. You're supposed to be up here for 5 minutes each, you know? So that's it. Drive safely, please. My name is Eric Westhoff. I'm the editor-in-chief of Green Tech Media. I don't have a skit. I don't have the voice of God. I don't have even a bad battery joke. I have a quote. The storage battery is a mechanism for swindling the public. Just as soon as a man gets working on the secondary battery, it brings out his latent capacity for lying. That's Thomas Edison, 1883. And I've spoken to 15 flow battery companies in the last 2 weeks, so I have experienced that whole latent capacity for lying on a mass basis. It's early days in energy storage. Green Tech Media, the researchers, the smart people at my company, have energy storage in the US at 61 megawatts last year and 220 megawatts this year. Putting that a little bit in perspective, SunPower produces more than 220 megawatts of solar panels a month. I think it's close enough rounding. We won't talk about duty cycles and actual megawatt hours produced, but it's still early days in energy storage. And we took some questions from the audience prior to this, and they were really, surprisingly, great, thoughtful questions. And so I wanted to actually ask them, some of them in advance, just sort of provide some thematic bumpers, okay? So how about this one? Lithium ion gets a lot of press. Does it deserve it? Are there better battery storage or battery technologies that you think will grab the majority share of utility scale deployments? That's a good question. Probably not for anybody in this on the panel, but there are folks in the audience who might be able to answer that. Here's a good question. Is Tesla's Powerwall battery a viable, cost-effective storage option? So we'll be asking that. And here's another great question. Thank you for these thoughtful questions. Why should anyone in California pay for battery storage when net energy metering provides 100% round-trip efficiency and better economic benefits at no cost? How long do you think the current structure of net metering will continue? So right there, we have enough for a couple of hours. So I tried to quietly listen to these presentations, and I have just a couple of questions. Chris, you talked about how energy technology could be, how you'd like to be getting more technology on the grid. But if you ask any startup, getting technology onto the grid is difficult. People tend to get lost in pilot purgatory. Is there a regulatory construct? Is there something that the PUC can do that will allow utilities working with startups to be a little more aggressive and a little more risk welcome than they currently are?
Well, I think that that there's always opportunities for that. You know, as I even mentioned in the start of here, is that I do think that regulation, not necessarily just in California, but quite frankly everywhere, has got to embrace the pace of change and create a little bit more of a flexible environment that would allow technologies and the utilities to work together and within a framework at least be able to bring more on in a different way than what we currently have. I mean, admittedly, the utilities are not always, as a whole, the fastest moving themselves, and so we've got to learn to be more flexible and more proactive with
But
our customers.
you're driven by regulatory
We have to operate
constructs.
within. Yeah, absolutely. We have
So
to,
I'm asking you, what could a PUC do to rate base a higher risk technology?
Yeah, well, I think in what they can do is that they could say, hey, why don't you guys, we'll give you almost like seed money, if you will, to do R&D, where you can then come in and bring different people in. And they've done a little bit of that. So for instance, in California, we've got a mandate on storage. And you can think about it in that way. It's not just battery storage, it's storage.
It's
so,
1.3 gigawatts of energy storage
Exactly.
by 2030.
30, I think, yeah. And so we are going out and looking and embracing as many different technologies as we can to see what are those that might work better than others. And so that is a way to do that.
But we
though.
discussed this earlier, and I don't want to put you on the spot. By the way, he's retiring at the end of this year, right? He's the chairman of PG&E, former president, and he has it rhymes with a bucket list that he'd like to get off his chest now that he's at the end of his career.
You wish.
Anyway, okay. Nevertheless, we discussed that one of the main pilots that PG&E is working on is a NGK sodium sulfur battery, which is not is reliable utility scale battery technology, but it may not be exactly cutting edge. And that pilot dates back from a 6-year origination. All right. We said it was very easy to beat up on utilities, right?
Now, we have, we have a couple different pilots that we're looking at our own battery technology, but then we are right now reviewing a large number of proposals by vastly different companies on different types of storage, whether it's lithium-ion batteries or whether it's flywheel technology or whether it's compressed air storage. We're going to go and use a lot of different ones, just like we did with solar. When the solar came out, we didn't stick with this one type of solar. We went through a lot of different technologies and brought those all in to see which ones would start to advance.
Okay. Matteo, how about we go to these audience questions? Does Tesla have any flexibility of moving from lithium ion now that you've invested a couple of $1 billion in a gigafactory? Is there any wiggle room, or lithium ion is the only choice to make? It is the silicon of energy storage. And while you're at it, you can tell us if the Powerwall is a viable, cost-effective storage solution.
Well, I read that article on Green Tech about how lithium-ion was the silicon. And I love Andrew Beebe. He's a great guy. But yeah, I mean, Tesla gets asked frequently, what if a new battery technology comes down the pipe? I mean, I think our response is if a new battery technology truly comes down the pipe, there would be a happier company in the world than Tesla. We've bet the whole company on battery technology improving. And we believe it'll improve across all the major metrics. We think for now lithium-ion is the winner, but we're not technology orthodoxy here. We're not saying that the norms must be lithium-ion. I think we're open to whatever technologies are truly proven to exist. Right.
So, but you did mention a couple of applications, whether it be load shifting, peak shaving, DR, grid services, and capacity firming. Those are mostly power applications, right? Short duration, 15-minute, 1-hour type of shifts.
No.
It's not, no, okay. No. So it's several hours?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, Tesla, it's called Tesla Energy, first of all.
Okay. Are you spinning that off in a separate company?
Is there going to
be an IPO?
We call it Tesla Energy, not Tesla Power.
Okay.
That's
Tesla Energy.
Point of
Gotcha.
comparison. The cars, we have done a lot of optimization around energy, right? It does require energy to move the car around, not just power. And we are capable of addressing any power application so long as we have enough energy. We're not doing any power-only applications, but we're certainly able to do any power application that's required.
Okay. We'll talk a little bit about all these applications we've talked about. We haven't spoken about what they're worth or what people are willing to pay for them, and that's going to be a strong. We'll come back. We'll come back to that. Jack, this is just a general question. You're a solar company. What catalyzed? What pushed you into being a solar storage company? Tell me what stage you're at now and who you're working with, and how SunPower and Total, your overlord, tells you what to do.
Sure. Before we do that, could we get the second part?
Oh yeah, let's
answer.
do that. Let's do that.
I'm dying to know the answer to that.
Do you want to talk about the power
I'll do
law?
it. I
'Cause
got
that's
it.
a
I'm
very
just
long
joking.
conversation.
No.
All right.
So, what we've seen with our customers in both res, commercial, and utility, primarily res and commercial, is they're coming to us for more and more solutions, and we see storage as being a valuable tool to provide a solution. And the solution could be a backup system in North America. The solution could be demand charge reduction for a commercial customer. The solution could be for storage, could be around self-consumption, which is becoming more and more of an economic argument in Europe. So for us, it's a natural extension of a solar energy solution, and something that our customers are really asking for. And to us, makes a lot of sense to have that be an integrated solution for our customers. So that's really the premise behind it, and it fits in with the rest of the things we're doing around energy information and energy management as a complete package, because sometimes it may make sense to store it, sometimes it may make sense to defer operating something for some period of time rather than store that energy. So we're looking at it from a complete solution perspective, and storage provides a piece of that puzzle.
We've reported on the partnerships that people have made in solar and storage, and people have just teamed up like picking teams after school. But that's sort of there's been more action in the partnerships than there has actually in the actual megawatts shipped. Can I say these kind of nasty things? That's why I'm here. That's why they keep calling me back. Raghu, are you stalking this cricketer in Sri Lanka?
No, but I still haven't gotten an email.
I wanted to ask you, Raghu, you're a microinverter company. You've shipped 9 million units, you said, and you're the best microinverter company in the universe, or certainly the most high-volume company, microinverter company. You created that industry. Why are you Enphase Energy? Why are you sort of confusing journalists and to some extent Wall Street by what, if you're a pure play microinverter, it's sort of easy for, somebody to understand. But if you're an energy company, it starts to, there's a lot of moving parts.
Yeah, it's a fair confusion. I think, the way we think about this is generation and consumption are effectively two sides of the same coin, and they're tied. And really the enabler for all of that has got to be, so you got generation, which we do. You got to do load management, and you got to have storage, because that kind of brings it all together. That's one reason. And the second reason is we also feel like, you don't go out today and buy a motherboard, a graphics card, and a NIC card. You just don't do that. You just go out there and you buy a laptop, or you buy an iPhone or a phone. And you're surfing in a second, right? And so we really believe that you have to provide complete solutions. And so we anticipate that the really crossing the chasm for this, for what we are here for, is going to be about people going out there and buying energy systems. So my friend's grandmother in Peoria, she's just going to, she doesn't want to, oh, what inverter are you buying? Oh, okay, and what battery and what load control and oh, am I doing demand response? She's not going to be doing that. She's going to say, hey, I want an energy system that delivers me the most economical, the cleanest form of energy. So I think you don't have a choice. I think it's a choice and an opportunity. You just have to provide a complete solution, not individual widgets.
Okay. All right, so if I buy a gallon of gas, it's $3 and change. If I buy a quarter of milk, it's $1.79. If I buy a Tesla, it's $90,000, something like that, right? Depending on color and finish. But if I want to buy a kilowatt hour of energy storage, I don't know what that costs. That seems to be a problem. It's how can you have a market in something that you don't actually know the pricing of it? So, Matteo, tell me where the value of solar is the because we're going to have a hard time finding the value of a Powerwall in somebody's garage aside from the sheer joy of having that product. But I gave you those numbers. Most of the storage that's out there is utility. It's 90% utility and 10% behind the blurring meter line that you talked about. Who's deploying this 200 megawatts of energy storage this year? I know that your name is on a lot of SGIP applications. Where is this stuff being used? Not yours personally, Tesla.
I don't know where the 200 megawatts are being deployed because I didn't read the report. But I mean, all utility markets are local at the end of the day, and the value proposition has to be tailored to the geography in which you're operating. So, there is in many cases no uniform. I mean, I should say, in all good, there's no uniform offer just around the globe. Just like solar is sold differently, market to market, utility to utility, rate tariff to rate tariff.
But Raghu, there's applications for energy storage in your battery, and SunPower is also looking at, I believe, Australia as a prime place because of self-consumption, high energy costs, and some other regulatory local situations, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's my point. You need to come up with the offering that is reconciled to the local markets, and there's plenty of market for it. You listed some of them, but they're present here in the United States too. It's not like
So what are those applications in the United States?
I mean, the idea is to use storage in an aggregated fashion, right? It's whether the key is to make sure that the value that's in the storage is available to the person that realizes the value, and the markets that are being established through different rate designs, through different market designs, are really enabling some of that to come out. And we're not sort of talking about some of these yet, but they'll be out there soon.
All right. In fact, your cousin company, Solar City, in 2016 is going to be offering a PPA in Hawaii that's an off-grid contract. Is that right?
I don't speak for Solar City.
Okay. I do. So Solar City is going to be offering in 2016 a PPA in Hawaii that's just energy storage with solar and cutting the cord to the utility. And it can be done when cost of electricity is 45 cents per kilowatt hour. Okay, so I want to get back to the Powerwall and residential battery storage. I had to live through that hype festival, and you're going to have to answer to that. Is that, and the marketing is genius, but is there any real economic reason to put a Powerwall on your wall?
Of course there is.
The sour milk you would have if there was a power outage, right? If you'd be able to keep the refrigerator on for those few hours, right?
No. I mean, Eric, come on. Don't try and overly simplify the question. The fact of the matter is there's value in lots of places in the world for storage today at the residential level.
Okay. I know. All right. So let's go to another topic. You talked about aggregating the energy storage, and that sounds interesting. All of a sudden, that you can create virtual power plants, and you can say you have 40 megawatts of energy storage that are accessible to you that we can do whatever you want with. Is that? Do you see? So that all of a sudden involves the utility. Chris? But the other thing is, who controls this? Because Raghu has all this information. He's looking at all these red spots and sending out signals with his inverter. And utilities like to control those things, right? And so there's a bit of a conflict there. Does the utility prefer to would the utility prefer to control that entirely, or would they see that in the hands of Raghu when he's not stalking that cricketer?
Yeah, actually, that's what's getting discussed right now in New York. And then in California, probably just in a little bit here over the next year, is to, all of this is wonderful, and we're excited about being able to tap into that, but it does come down to what is the system to control all that? Because if we don't, you no longer know if this one person is on vacation, and so you're not going to have any electricity coming out of their house or out of their storage, or all of a sudden this whole community is putting a whole bunch of it on. So what does that do to the system, and how do you control that? Because in the future, people, today, when everybody has if they have a solar panel on their rooftop, they're not calling us up and saying, well, I'm planning on putting X amount of electricity back onto the system in the next couple of days. But in general, that's how traditionally the power market has worked, is that our guys know from the generating stations how much is basically going to be used. So we've got to get the big data and understand that more effectively through the different logarithms, as you will, as to, so what is that going to look like on our system? And what's our capability to potentially pull a little bit to meet the demands? And it won't even necessarily be the utility, it could be the independent system operator that does some of that too. And so that's the discussion that's going on, is how do we now take advantage of all of this and understand where the power is going to come from, where it's going to need to flow, and how do we make sure that that doesn't disrupt the whole system?
But you mentioned that there are 3 rate reform issues going on right now. And one of them is net energy metering 2.0 in California, right?
Yeah.
And other rate reform where the 4-tier system will become a 2-tier system?
In California, yeah.
In California, along with a potential time of use charges, right?
Yeah.
So in that construct, Matteo and Raghu, does that make storage a better thing? That helps your storage situation when that rate change is made. Is that right?
Sorry, go ahead. So I think there are going to be many different economic cases for storage. There's some of them. Self-consumption clearly drives an economic case. You're doing peak shifting there, aligning load peaks and generation peaks. But I also want to come back to the fact that we can provide additional services, right, for the support of the grid that has nothing to do with the system owner. So, you can do things like, and by the way, there's control for that. Those services that you can provide, those controls for that happen at different levels. There can be some services and controls that can be provided by these systems that are completely autonomous. There's nothing, you don't have to send any remote signals or do any remote management. You can do them, they can be autonomous. They can make autonomous decisions.
So you're talking about power conditioning and keeping the power on the line clean, and is that what the services you're talking about?
Yes, that's one example of it. So capacity demand response is another example of it, right? Injecting VARs into the network is another example of it. Right?
So by doing that autonomously, you've kind of taken the utility out of the program.
No,
to some
there are
extent.
different levels of it, right? In some instances, you may have to do it at cycle speed. You're not going to be sending, the fastest signal, an automatic generation control is like 2 seconds or 4 second signal. It's too slow. You may have to do it at cycle speed. So a lot of those things are going to happen autonomously. But at the network level, you'll probably manage it at little bit at a slower rate, and it's going to happen with, maybe there's an abstraction layer and the utility talks to that layer in the middle, and then that then talks to the hundreds of thousands of distributed energy resources that are out there.
I want to get back to that damn formula, the PV plus solar. Matteo, are you, so Elon Musk said recently that we won't have to build peaker plants anymore if we have enough energy storage. And that same thing was echoed by the NextEra CEO, Jim Robo, who said after 2020 we won't be building peaker plants. So I know we're here to talk about solar plus storage, but is storage really, it stands alone and it doesn't really always need that PV on the side? So I guess I'm asking you, how much of your storage that you've delivered is in tandem with PV?
I mean, a meaningful portion of it does have some form of renewable generation attached to it. But I think that that path of having standalone storage is certainly one that we think is going to be a big part of the market going forward. As a matter of fact, in the RFO that has been awarded already for SoCal Edison, much of that storage will be standalone.
Standalone, yeah.
So, and the application in that case is essentially peaking a resource, right? It's capacity. It's
Yep.
resource adequacy, as we call it here in
And Raghu,
California.
you don't have to, can you sell batteries divorced from panels? Or do you have to have microinverters in this
Absolutely,
situation?
absolutely. I mean, we think that a good portion of these systems will be sold with no storage, no solar attached to them. And that's what I mean, our architecture is all, interconnects on the AC side. So if the line diagram that I showed, you can have solar only, you can have storage only, you can have both. And for example, this is just maybe a bit of a stretch, but imagine an apartment complex and everybody's got a little storage system in their apartment, in their closet. And that storage system is providing services. So it's feasible, absolutely. There is no reason why storage solutions should be attached to solar only. They provide different benefits. In one case, you're doing peak shifting. In the other case, it could be purely services.
Okay. So the holy grail, I promised I wasn't going to say that, but I did, of energy storage has been this mass multi-hour shifting of using wind produced at night when it's cheap to provide power during the day when it costs a lot of money. Are you seeing at the PG&E level, with SunPower, do you see applications for more than 1 hour times 15 minutes, or 1 megawatt times 15 minutes, or 1 megawatt times an hour? Are there applications are there needs for 4 hours and 6 hour durations?
I mean, from the PG&E aspect and looking at the state, there was a great example, I forget which one of you guys put it up there, that shows that, our challenge is that our peak demand is in the evening when people get home and turn on their lights and their air conditioning after work. And yet solar, the peak supply is in the middle of the day. And so, if you can get some larger scale, I know a lot of this conversation has been more about the storage in the house, which is cool and sounds great. But from running a utility, being able to have a much larger scale battery that maybe you put in a local substation or in a community itself, and being able to take, whether it's wind or solar, or even if you use conventional generation, and be able to store it and use it and shift it from that middle of the afternoon to the middle of the evening for longer periods of time, and much better. That's really the kind of solutions
So
that we
these
need to see.
these RFQs that have come out of Southern California Edison are pretty much saying we need storage right there, right? They're saying we need it at this particular substation because there's congestion in that area, right? And it has nothing to do with solar. So I guess I'm going up against that equation that storage is going to be making amazing strides on the grid, but it may not always be teamed, especially at the utility scale. Especially, it's going to be operating alone at the substation level.
Yeah, I mean, from my aspect, it's fun to talk about the solar and the storage together, because that's for the individual. And who knows how big that will become and how fast that'll be adopted or even affordable for the individuals. But I do think both solar and storage, not necessarily linked together, are very important for us going forward in the clean energy that we'd like to have. And they can work together, or they can work separately with other fuel sources. And so I think it's great to move that forward. I don't know that they have to be linked together all the time.
Yeah, just a quick, I agree with you. I think there are independent solutions or opportunities where storage makes sense. There are also opportunities where sort of solar plus storage, there are some synergies and benefits, whether it's interconnection and leveraging that, or getting longer term load shifting someplace where the retail energy prices are very high. And like any new technology or new technology that enters a market, there's going to be a smaller subset of the market where the application makes sense. And I think we're starting to, we're at that point in the solar plus storage opportunity, and it's just going to, as the technology matures and as costs come down and as people wrap their head around the things it can do, it's only going to expand.
I mean, I love even just start with where solar is. I told you we have 175,000 solar rooftops in our service territory, and it's the 1/4 of the United States numbers. We have 5.5 million electric customers. So it's, how fast is that gonna continue to go? It's raising quickly, and we expect it to be a big part of our future, but it's still right now a small number.
That's true.
If I may, I think this barrier of behind the meter, in front of the meter is kind of artificial almost. Now, there are some policy-related issues, I understand that. Purely from a technology standpoint, I think that barrier is artificial. Imagine, like you have hundreds of thousands of behind the meter or these AC or storage systems sitting behind people's homes, garages, closets, what have you. That whole thing, if you have a software layer, you can completely aggregate and
Well,
virtualize
but I
that.
think what we're saying by behind the meter, we're saying either the resident or the business controls it, or the utility controls it. And that's not arbitrary, and that's where the money goes, and I don't think anybody's going to want to be blurry about
No,
that.
but the utility can control it. There is no reason why the utility cannot control it. Of course, has to be the right compensation mechanisms for it. I think there is now PUC discussions going on about, how do you compensate for all these services that you're capable of providing? So I think my point is, I don't, distributed energy resources or behind the meter storage plays as vital a role in providing those same services that you can do at the substation level. Not having done a single install at the substation level, I may be completely wrong, but it hasn't stopped me from saying that before.
Does anybody in the audience want to talk about some other energy storage topic, like long-duration energy storage? So enough of these 15-minute men. Can we have something from Danielle? Would you like to give it? Danielle Fung is the founder of Light Sail Energy, and she has an opinion. Sorry, put you on the spot here. Hi.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for great informative presentations and lots of interesting discussion. So for us, it really does seem like there's an inflection point or kind of a series of them where you progressively just get cheaper than the cost of peak power and peak grid upgrades. So the way that we frame this is there's just a simple formula. It's not an equation, a formula, where you take the cost of off-peak power and you add that to the cost of the energy storage amortized over everything, and you try to make that cheaper than the cost of peak power and grid upgrades. And I've done my best to try to get the cost of lithium-ion batteries. I know you've done that homework too, Eric, and the cost of a bunch of different things. And I've tried to plot that over time to figure out for the best generic case that I could imagine. Are you going to be cheaper than, say, diesel power, like peak power? And I've found that if you take kind of, not even like super optimistic numbers, but just like, semi-optimistic numbers, and you're a little clever with the business case, you can actually make it work with lithium ion. And it just crossed in 2014, 2015, pretty much when Tesla announced the Gigafactory. Like I would say with my own analysis, it does look like they've crossed it, so good job, guys. I know you won't admit it for yourselves, but I'm high five for that one. On the other hand, we think that we can do better. And of course, that depends entirely on us, getting to scale and reducing costs. What we have is a compressed air energy storage technology that is much more efficient than it had been and uses really low cost tanks, which we also manufacture, and that enables us to have extremely long cycle life. We haven't announced this publicly yet, so I guess this counts. We just got ASME certification, so you had to do like 60,000 cycles to get it, shoot it with a gun, do all kinds of crazy stuff to get that. And so now we have something that lasts a lot longer, and that plus the fact that it costs much less, probably shouldn't admit this, but I will, here we go. The cost of making our air tanks is less than $200 per kilowatt hour now, like made in Berkeley. and they last for 20 years without retest. So that gives us a huge bump to be much cheaper on a levelized cost of energy basis. And if what we're trying to do holds true when we really manufacture that and put that out on the market and everything works, then that really would make the solar plus energy storage case take off. Maybe it wouldn't be grid 2.0, but it certainly would be a fantastic business, and it would enable power at an extremely low price compared with what people had previously had in areas where they had to previously use diesel or whatever. So that's what I think.
All right.
As an impromptu
Thank you.
sort of thing.
That's cool. Sir,
I'd like to ask a question, please.
are we doing this organized with cards or with microphones, or with just
Well-
anarchy? Anarchy is.
Well, this is a
Bring
microphone,
me
so
some
I'll
cards.
use it while I have it. I have not heard the word security mentioned, and I'm wondering, with all this interconnected networking, there's an increasing vulnerability to malicious hijacking of the network, and you can as easily shut it down as optimize it. So what is being done in this space to address the issues of security in the grid?
As a reporter covering this, I would say about absolutely nothing that I've covered so far. Not a lot at the consumer level. Is that?
I mean, for us as a utility, it's probably one of our number one concern, is cybersecurity around the network. With all the technology that's coming on board, we have to invest tons of money in making sure that it's secure. Because, you know, one of the worst things that could happen from an electric side is that, at least for me, the city of San Francisco goes dark for a month. You know, that would be terrible. So we have a lot that we're going on. We work very closely with the federal government to make sure that there's some sharing of information as to where threats are coming from and what they've seen. And in the meantime, we're constantly looking at what we can do to secure the system. But I'll tell you, you know, the fear that I have is that no matter how many people and how many dollars I spend on fixing and enhancing the system, there's nations that are paying thousands of dollars to people to try to find a way in. And it's constant. And so it is something that we actually put into overall as a safety focus for us as a company, not just IT, but it's a safety focus on how do we make sure that that's true. And so as we bring in a lot of these new technologies, that does create the potential for other areas that we have to make sure are secure.
Do we have cards or the microphone going around? Okay.
I just had, I guess, more of a comment to push back on your Powerwall inquisition. I think it's the wrong question. There's the wrong approach. Maybe you were at that same podium 7 years ago asking the same question about solar panels when they were just for rich tree huggers. And now I see where we are, and I see the potential for the batteries, or the case will be even easier because there are other applications like the cars who are going to drive the demand and the scale, and it won't initially require, say, a country like China deciding that they want to own this space. So I think we're just at the beginning, and it's going to take off, and the future is very big for it.
All right. Well, that's the old energy storage is like solar was 7 years ago, 8 years ago meme. And if that's true, then you're in for a really crappy next 4 or 5 years. Right? 90% of you are going to go out of business. There's going to be an overcapacity. There's going to be a Solyndra, DOE loans, and that list of stuff. So that's not my favorite meme of energy storage is going to be like solar. Plus, solar had net energy metering 7 years ago, and energy storage doesn't have that exactly today. And so there's a little bit of a difference. I don't know if that question was for me, sir.
Okay, next question. For Mr. Johns. Can you support the active and growing movement in the USA to legally require utilities to pay back more money to people and companies that provide power to the grid? In Germany, their recent legal action resulted in a huge boom in the use of solar power. I think 3 cities in Germany are now 100% solar powered, and battery storage. These aren't good for eclipses like they just had. but they voted that the utilities had to pay back a higher rate for power provided by the individual in the communities. Why can't we do that here?
Well, I guess the question is that what is the value of the power that they're putting back on? I mean, right now in California, they're getting full retail rate, which is much higher than what the power is worth that's coming back on the grid, because it's paying for all the, it's basically giving you credit for all the lines that you're not paying for. So so for instance,
That
right
seems
now,
like the logical number on what solar should be, but there are other folks who think that solar has a greater value
oh yeah,
than
no,
that.
you know what, and I understand those arguments, that solar has the value of, well, you won't have to build as many transmission lines, and that you will, you know, and there's value in that, and you know what, I agree with that. There is some value of it, not all the way to the full retail rate of it, because I mean, essentially, if you want to go to the extreme, what does that mean? Well, somebody who generates more power from their solar panel than they use during the year, they're going to have a zero energy bill. Well, that might sound right, except what about the fact that at night they're using the wires that are going into their homes to provide light, but they're not having to pay for that. So who is paying for that? The rest of the community that doesn't have solar on their rooftop is paying for that. So you know, it sounds like that the utilities don't support that. Actually, we do. I'd love it if all of our customers wanted to have solar panels and could have solar panels. Fantastic. What we need to do, though, is figure out what is the right amount for the utilities to pay, or the market to pay. It's not even the utilities, quite frankly, it's the rest of the customers, to pay for that power that is coming back onto the grid. And as I said earlier, then how do we structure it the right way to say, so what is the value of having that line go into your house and that transformer outside on the pole that is backing up the system today? And you know, and that'll change and get even more complicated as people have storage units in their homes. Because that then says, okay, now I've got my own and I only might need you a little bit. And so what's the value of that little bit that you call on? And those are the things we're working through right now, is just how do we do that that's fair for all the customers? Because many of our customers can't afford, even today, solar panels for as much as they've come down, can't afford them. And so what are they paying for?
So they're still for rich tree huggers.
Okay. First of all, I can say definitively that God is in Sri Lanka. I dropped her off at the airport yesterday morning, Skyped her today, so she's there. I actually can be a customer of every single one of you up there. I have solar panels on my roof currently. I'm not against expanding that. I'm not against looking into power walls. I have N-phase inverters. My question is, I just got a note from PG&E saying you want to raise my connection fee for having solar panels on my home, and I look at that and I add it up and it's $3,000 over the life of my roof. And I start to think, well, should I really be paying that $3,000? Are there storage mechanisms that I can start to use that would allow me to go grid independent? And I have two storage issues that come to mind. One is, how do I keep power overnight? And the other is, how do I power myself, excuse me, through the winter when my solar power on the roof is inadequate to manage the load through the winter? I'm, net positive in the summer, net negative in the winter. And so I start to think about these things and say, well, what is the most cost-effective solution? And I'm wondering if the folks up there might help me think this through as to how I could approach this. And one way, just to tell you how easily bizarre this can get, I can look at buying things like fuel cells. I can also look at driving my electric vehicle to a supercharging station, come home, and plug that back into battery storage. And that could actually be cost effective if I'm willing to put up with the 45 minutes of supercharging. So I'm just saying people will get very creative with this, and I'm curious as to how you look at this.
He's the stationary battery guy. Oh, that's okay. So I think your question, what was your question?
Honestly,
companies...
I would not disconnect from the grid. I think there's there's network benefits there of being connected to the grid. You get, one could argue you have greater degree of resiliency by doing that. Beyond just these seasonal problems that you're mentioning, I think there is a societal benefit to staying connected to the grid in some sense.
So, but one of the drivers to solar and storage in Germany is a general pissed offedness at the utility and a desire to not be involved with the utility. I mean, we talked to energy storage companies. Sonnen Battery is one of the large ones, and that they cite that as I mean, maybe it's a very tiny percentage of people who can afford to do that, but that's a driver right now. Matteo, I think we're all still looking at you for an answer for some of these questions. Nope. Okay. Anybody else in the audience?
We just had someone asked about security issues. I heard from PG&E. I didn't hear from the other three companies, all of whom have big issues with security and probably less infrastructure to deal with how to make their system secure. Especially if I hear I have 2 terabytes a day coming over from someone's inverters, and I wasn't quite sure how much information the Tesla is transmitting to their cars or receiving from them. So I wanted to have the other three companies there talk about security.
I'll start. I think there are regulations around it. It affects mostly for us our large-scale power plants. Those qualify under, and I'm going to kind of go outside my knowledge base here a little bit, but FERC or NERC requirements around operating those power plants. So we actually have a regulated control center that is audited and certified against, among other things, data security issues. I'm going to guess a lot of companies like us have that capability. That said, we are always working on data security in all of the products that we sell to ensure, and we've had no issues to date with any data security problems. But this is certainly a big concern of ours. We're doing everything we can to stay on top
Matteo,
of it.
Tesla has to be dealing with this for their automotive downloads and all that information that's coming. You talked about every battery, you know the sort of the profile of your chart. So that's all anonymized and aggregated, right?
Yeah, I mean, to be clear, I'm not on the vehicle side, so I can't speak at that, at great length. But we've subjected our cars to hacker contests in China, and turns out that if you're inside the car, you can press the brake pedal, right? You can do that if you break the window and get inside the car. You can press the brake pedal. So, we've subjected our systems to all sorts of security tests, and we have a very robust approach to data security. Of course, on the vehicle side, battery systems we have connected to utility systems directly. They're very strict communication protocols. Sometimes there's air gap requirements for control. So we're familiar with those. We've already done that kind of thing. The great thing is that the utility industry already has their way for ensuring data security and control security. And our job is to design battery systems that can seamlessly be integrated into those control systems that are already in place, and we've done that.
It's an incredibly important topic, without doubt. As you can imagine, you can affect a substantial portion of the grid. And so, again,
Right.
we're all doing the right things in order to make the systems more and more secure. Is it 100%? I mean, look, the U.S. government gets broken into. So the fact of the matter is, you just have to keep at it and not
Well, and forgive me,
comply.
but Chris, the most notable security breach of late at PG&E is not having to do with software, right? It's having to do with
Physical security.
physical security.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, we have a question from the MC. Can we create dynamic price signals to motivate generators, storage assets, customers, and utilities? Who should lead these efforts, and how long will it take? We have 3 minutes, right, so we can cover this. I mean, that's really the question of what Grid 2.0 is, right? I'll take it. I'll take this question. I mean, you're basically asking for a distributed energy resource management system here, DERMS, beautiful. And they also came up with DERP. Can you believe that there's a distributed energy resource program? They actually made an acronym called DERP. Nobody got it. Nobody understood it. I guess you have to know what derp. Anyway, where are we? So here's Barry Cinnamon's question. Who's going to lead this DERMS? It's happening in New York now. How is it? It's happening very much so in New York, but it's less so in California, right? Are these the integrated resource? Distributed
Yeah, I mean,
resource
actually, in
plan?
California, you're right, New York is a little bit ahead in this, but California is not very far behind. There's an ongoing proceeding in front of the commission right now to take a look at these issues. And I think, actually, it is something that can be done, to answer the question, yes, but it's going to take all of us working together to get that done, whether it's through the regulatory process or through a legislative process. It can't be just the utilities doing it, because we will have one mindset to go one way. And it can't just be any one of these companies doing it. It's got to be all of us working together to say, here's the best thing for our customers. Here, we're all trying to make it the most affordable we can and the most reliable we can for our customers. So we've all got to be involved in it and get all those different views out on the table so that we can come up with
I think that's a good place to kind of, and you'll have to ask your questions, you'll have to swarm the panelists at the end. So it's a difficult topic, and I hope we tried to stick to the argument at hand. I mean, we went off on a lot of tangents, but I hope we kind of stuck to Grid 2.0, solar, and storage. Thanks to our panelists, thanks to our audience panelists, Daniel Funk, and thanks to you for coming.